life is bounded by mortality, but that doesn't mean that you don't get out there and contend and minimize the net amount of suffering in the world. That is something. If you like this episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Welcome back to an inspiring episode of the Heart Healthy Hustle Show. I'm your host, Jonathan, and I am stoked that you're here. Excited to share this episode because it's something I've been going through recently. And if I know from talking with friends and people who have been reaching out to me, I'm not alone. So I figured, why not talk about it? I want to encourage you to jump over to grab a free audiobook. What's interesting is I'm going to encourage you to do this if and only if you're not already reading 3 to 5 other books and you're only partially way through maybe 3 of them or 1 of them. Pick one and finish it. Free audiobook you can get at HHHaudiobook.com. That's HHH audiobook.com, as in Heart Healthy Hustle. Today's episode, I'm going to talk about mastery versus overload and what it's been looking like as I've been dealing with some overload. As we get more and more into trying to become our best, lifting others up around us, doing everything we can possibly do, and living wide open, I'll be honest with you, I've been learning how to live wide open and how to actually go all out all the time without burning out. And I have been facing some symptoms of burnout. I'm not burnout, but I have been facing some symptoms. And I think it's very simple to get to that point of burnout. Today's episode, I want to go over some symptoms of burnout. So maybe you are going through it and you're not sure what's been going on, but you feel off. So we're going to talk about burnout. We're going to talk about how and why it happens with overload. And then we're going to talk about mastery versus overload and some of the pros and cons. Burning out is something that I think has a very relative definition. Physical manifestations of burnout to me look like this. Brain fog almost every day. Over-reliance and becoming numb to tools that you use to become more focused. So let's say coffee, caffeine. Numbness in the sense you're not even realizing that you actually went for that second cup. You're not even registering, whereas you used to pick up 1 cup of coffee, maybe 2, and say, okay, this is my second cup. Now, at the end of the day, you've drank 3 or 4, and you didn't even realize, you lost count, that kind of thing. You're taking a caffeine pill in the morning like myself so you can save time to not even have to make coffee anymore. These are some signs. These are just some signs that you might be overdoing it. And again, another symptom, lower standards for yourself and for those around you. When you start to let certain things slide, you let your laundry pile up a little bit more than it used to. Maybe you are skipping deadlines or getting closer to a deadline than you ever would have in the past. Letting things pile up on top of each other. You're skipping that, shoveling the piles when they're small, so to speak, as we learned from Chris Lytle on episode 1 of the Heart Healthy Hustle, author of The Accidental Salesperson. Chris talked about shoveling the piles while they are small. If you are burned out or you're facing some symptoms of burnout, it's something that for my personality type, and I know a lot of you can relate to this, you don't want to be burned out. You don't want to burn out. And so therefore, it's so hard to acknowledge it when it actually is happening. Even though it is happening, and if you refuse to acknowledge it, it only becomes worse. We subconsciously understand that, but we also don't want to acknowledge it because it's just this elephant in the room of, if I'm burned out, then I can't keep living the way I'm living and I have to change things. And if I change things, maybe I won't get to my goal as fast. And if I don't get to my goal as fast, then I won't fulfill my destiny and my purpose and all this stuff. And so I don't even want to call it a rut because you may be a max producer right now. You may be crushing it at whatever it is you're doing. You may have an amazing social life and you may be making bank and you may be giving a lot and being very generous with your time and who you are and your money and everything. Even so, you could still be facing some burnout. Other symptoms that I see are very indicative of burnout. An overfocus on new ideas or ideals. Allow me to explain. Where you see a new opportunity that you know can and would work for you if you integrate it or implement it with your lifestyle, but you also know in the back of your mind, you already have priorities that you need to stick with. We have these priorities in our minds that, okay, this is what I'm doing, but then something pops up and it's an amazing opportunity, amazing business opportunity. A friend from college reaches out to you, whatever the case may be, and you know it would work if you went with it. But if you go with it, it may detract a little bit from what you're already doing. The lack of decisiveness or the lack of strength when it comes to being decisive, because you're almost hoping for that hammock or safety net or shortcut, so to speak, to deliver you out of that burnout that you're subconsciously aware of, but you don't want to acknowledge because you're not even sure how to define it. So I think that's a big step, is knowing how and therefore doing the defining of what burnout is and what it looks like when you start to become burned out. I think all of us, if we're honest, are probably somewhat burned out. That's my belief, genuinely. Very strong principle that actually holds true for regardless of what you believe is taking a Sabbath. So taking one day of the week where you do a rest time, where you rest. I'm telling you, this works regardless of what you believe. I haven't been taking it. I think it needs to be an intentional choice and decision to take a day of each week, every single week. And then there are also periodical Sabbaths where you take time to rest and recoup and recover and regenerate, maybe quarterly. Maybe you go on a 2-day vacation. Maybe annually you take a 2-week reprieve of whatever it is that you're always plugged into so hardcore. You will be more productive. Like, we are the types of people where we will become way more productive if and when we take those reprieves or rest regenerative times. Let's say you define yourself as somebody who is driven, somebody who knows what you want, somebody who knows your purpose even, and somebody who's pursuing it every single day with your whole heart. Let's say that's who you are. You're noticing that your standards for living are going down a little bit, letting things creep into your life that are actually not helpful. Maybe you're watching 2 more movies a month than you used to, or maybe you're aching to get a time where you can just be alone and lay down on a couch or on your bed and just unplug or unwind. People like us who are very driven and motivated in pursuing our purposes, we actually get energy from pursuing these things and living wide open and going all out, right? It's almost an energy source to do that. This is interesting. There are different types of burnout. One that would be the mind-numbing burnout of living in the matrix, the same mundane, boring thing every single day, day in and day out, to where your mind is numb. Your brain is not getting exercise. Everything's automated. You're not learning. You're not growing. You're not excited to do what you're doing. You're just going through the motions month after month after month. That can lead to a type of burnout. What I'm talking about with this episode is more of a burnout caused by used a little too much gas in 1 week, and then the next week, even though you are gaining energy from all these things you are doing in a positive way, you could be negatively affected the week prior because you gave a little too much. Yeah, I said it. Gave a little too much during 1 week. Look, sometimes that's life. That's required, and it happens, and it's awesome. Like, I'll give you an example. 2 weeks ago, I think it was maybe 3, I worked hard all week. Went for 1 day. I flew to Philadelphia, went to New Jersey, went to Philadelphia, and then flew back all within 30 hours in a time frame. Flew back to North Carolina so that I could be at my cousin's bachelor party. I don't regret doing that. But my point is, when we do those kinds of things after a long, fully productive week of hardcore work where normally you may take a little trip to the beach on that Saturday, or you'll just sit and talk with friends and unwind and journal and process, you actually go and fly somewhere, do things you're not used to for a weekend, or not even a weekend, 1 day, with people you're not seeing all the time. So everything's like new and it just drains you, because that kind of thing, that following week, of course, gets a little bit derailed. You have to weigh the pros and cons with these decisions. Of course, when it's a family thing, that for me is, way more of a pro than any kind of a con. You could list an example for yourself where maybe you volunteered for one too many organizations or projects 1 year, and you just find that, man, 2 months into it is just too much. You don't have energy to talk with your spouse, your partner, your loved one anymore. You don't have the time or the energy to exercise in a healthy pattern. All these things can add up. So one of the things I will say for burnout is to acknowledge it very seriously, because it matters. Now, if you don't acknowledge it and you just say, oh, okay, I'm going to live with my burnout, that's dangerous, because If we do that, then we're going to be derailed, unfortunately, long term, because you're not actually focusing on what you need to with energy and clarity that you normally would have. So we've now gone through some steps of identifying what it may look like when you're starting to burn out. Hopefully you've gotten to the process of deciding that you're not okay with just living with it. You want to acknowledge, hey, maybe I am dealing with a little bit of burnout. I got a lot of brain fog. I'm having trouble focusing. I'm not being as productive. I'm letting certain things slide. My willpower seems lower. I'm not exercising as much. I just don't have the energy. I just don't have the time. There's no way I can possibly do that and keep functioning. I'm going to get sick. Or maybe you got sick. Like all these things start to compound and say, hey, you know what? Maybe you got a point there, John. Maybe I have a little bit of burnout. What can we do about it? All right, so we talked in the beginning about we're going to identify what burnout may look like, some symptoms. Then we're going to talk about why we burn out and how we can avoid overload and what is overload. So for me, I'm looking at this and I'm recognizing that, hey, I've been doing a lot more than I was doing this time last year. I'm volunteering. I'm going to these events. I'm traveling a lot. And when I say traveling, I mean I'm not using a travel agent. I'm doing everything myself. I'm booking flights. I'm booking hotels. I'm booking Airbnbs, hailing Ubers and taxis and all this stuff while I'm on these trips. So that's a lot. It's a lot to handle all that. And you do it multiple times a year. It gets easier and easier, of course. But to recognize that, hey, that does take a little bit out of you. And you got to recognize and acknowledge that. Overload and burnout and why it happens. Started dealing with symptoms of burnout because, hear me on this is really key, of my desire to over-ingest. And what do you mean? Over-ingesting and therefore overloading myself with stimuli, with music, books, all this stuff becomes too much. Studies have been done that indicate we only retain, I think it's like 10% of what we read. Maybe it's 25%. If you're lucky and you have photographic memory, maybe you actually 90%. But again, I've also heard Tim Ferriss actually mention that he has not found it helpful for his growth to read more than one nonfiction book at a time. I'll say that again. Reading more than one nonfiction or even personal development or growth-focused book at a time has not actually been helpful to somebody like Tim Ferriss. He's a very successful individual in business. When we are overloading and over-ingesting, I think most all of us do that because we want to get to where we're going. We want to find the tools. We have the right mindset, right? We're looking to learn from people who have gone before us, who've already done it. Maybe we're being mentored from books, from real-life mentors, from groups we're going to, serving. We have all these things that we're recording information from. We get so excited and it's great, but then there comes a point, and this is when burnout, I think, starts to become that evil twin of progress. Instead of staying on that straight path of let's go, let's get it, acceleration, we're learning, we're growing, giving, it starts to be like you veer to the right. And you're veering off to the right, and then you start to spiral and spin, and then there's like fumes and smoke sputtering. If you consider yourself like a rocket and you look at that like imagery, that's kind of what burnout starts to look like, that slow veering off to the right. Direction will determine your destination. Your direction is going to determine your destination. So when you're veering off to the right, even 1 degree, let's say you're just not retaining the information anymore. So you're actually, that veering off to the right, 1 degree may actually just be the fact that you aren't retaining anything. So therefore you are wasting that time where you're ingesting more books. Eating fast food 2 more nights a week than you used to because you just have so much going on. You just don't have time, that kind of thing. That could be that 2 degree. And then you have that 3 degree. But here's the thing. Over time, that 2-3 degrees becomes a huge gap from where you should have been, where you want to go, right? That is what is so scary about that. Again, that direction determines your destiny. I highly recommend this book to anyone who is in your 20s, anyone at all, really. Read the book called The Principle of the Path. Book that anyone would benefit from. The point and the main premise of the book was this: knowing doesn't get you there, doing does. Knowing doesn't get you there, doing does. That book said, destiny is determined by direction, and distraction determines your direction. Why distraction is so sinister and why burnout is the evil twin of progress, in my opinion, is because when we're progressing, we want to throw in more coal on the fire, and we want to shovel even faster and recruit others to help, and that's all well and good. If we're a train, or our mission is a train, and we're shoveling coal in to keep it going, and we're shoveling faster and faster and faster and more coal, and we're asking for more and more coal to get poured in so that we can then shovel it into the engine and go faster and grow faster and more and faster and better, faster. And we keep calling for more, ingesting more and more coal. Eventually, we're just going to get piled. We're going to get avalanched with coal being poured on top of us as we're trying to shovel it faster and faster and faster into the engine because we've got great progress. But here's one of the things, the principle of the path, the slight edge, is that consistency over time. So being consistent and steady, I think, is more important and therefore would chase away that evil twin of progress. Granted, there are seasons and times to go like this, in my opinion, but all the time, I think the steady pace needs to be maintained. That way, that consistency and a healthy, productive consistency can be maintained. Then if there needs to be a season, you got the juice. You can go. Okay, I can give that 10% more in this season. When we're burning out, you may notice distractions creeping in. And this, I think, is the first attack against our well-being, really, are trying to be stolen by distraction. And say, oh, well, distractions are our friend, right? We love watching that certain TV show. We love watching in that movie, or depending on if it's actually healthy stuff you're ingesting, and you need it to unwind. I'm not knocking you. I do the same thing. What I'm getting at is when we start to let distraction creep in when we know we shouldn't, because it's actually like, okay, I should be going to bed right now, but I really just want to watch something. And that's what I'm referring to. When we let distraction creep in, distractions are you have to be very, very aware of this. I'm not saying be careful. I don't want to induce fear. I don't believe in living in fear at all, but I do believe in being proactive and offensive. And when you want to be offensive, when you notice yourself starting to burn out, be honest with yourself. Are you over-ingesting? But anyway, distractions will lead to direction, and direction will lead to your destiny. Good or bad. If you want to get to where you know you can be and where you need to be, your moral obligation to get to, you're going to need to acknowledge this stuff. Now, I'm going through it right now, and that is why I'm doing this episode with such passion, is because I know there's many of you listening out there right now who are going through the exact same thing. Maybe in your late 20s and you've picked up extra volunteer work. You've started a new job. You're traveling a lot. Things are great. You're dating, all this stuff. Things are going so great. You're very grateful for the experience, but you're noticing maybe you're letting distraction creep in a little too much. It's keeping you up a little too late. Maybe you could benefit now from focusing more on mastery, staying consistent in the long game versus overload. And here's where overload is such a tricky thing. Overload, in my opinion, is never good. Moderation. Everything in moderation. Here's the thing. Why does overload happen now? I think why overload happens is not necessarily always a negative thing. I think it's because we're so driven. I think it's because we want to get there quicker. We want to make sure we're doing every last possible drop of what we can do to make sure it happens. We are doing. A phrase I live by and believe in is pray to God like it all depends on Him and work like it all depends on you. I love that phrase. It's true. I think it's something that talk with Jeff Hoffman. He's a billionaire entrepreneur. He's won an Emmy as far as I remember. And he was talking to me about the first time he took out his Ferrari. And he was sharing about resonant frequency. I'm not saying that we should all focus on resonant frequency all the time and try to live a perfectly balanced life. I don't think that's even possible, okay? What I am saying is I think that overload often does happen and can happen when we get overzealous. We lose sight of the process. We maybe are lacking trust in the process that we're on. When we recalibrate, we step back, we realize, okay, maybe this is true. Maybe I've been ingesting too much. Easiest takeaway from this episode, assess how much and what you are ingesting. I'd recommend straight up, take a step back. This is where I'm coming from. I listen to an audiobook on my commutes. I also listen to music at times, but often it's audiobooks. I'm constantly renting and re-renting books from the library. I'm constantly podcasting, learning from new people I bring onto the show, people I meet at events, I'm learning that now, yes, it's good to have seasons of growth spurts and sprints and this and that. But as I go into burnout, when you start to burn out, because you're just not used to all this stuff, I think it's good to find that new normal, not plateau, but kind of find that new home base where you do function very highly. You actually are doing a lot of these things that you used to maybe dream of, and now you're living this life. It's great. I will invite you to take a step back from the ingestion, even the proactive things, because a lot of that ingestion might be too much, and therefore it's not being retained at all, maybe 2%, and you're just tired. You're in the car, 20 minutes have gone by, you don't know anything that was just said on that last podcast that you were listening to on your commute, or that audiobook that you were listening to. If that's happening to you, I would invite you to go ahead and unplug. Drive with no music. Go to a restaurant alone and just sit there. Take a walk in nature. Do what needs to be done to recalibrate. Don't completely unplug, except for that one day a week, but on the daily, consistent TikTok baseline, be honest with yourself. Am I over ingesting? It's okay. Don't judge yourself. I think it's endearing. I think it's great when I'm pushing myself so hard because I want to give so much and get there quicker. It's endearing. Don't judge yourself. As the time ticks, are you wasting any time? Even on things that should be good or should be proactive or helpful? Is it wasted time? Claim that time back. If you don't, you're going to end up having wasted time, and wasted time is never okay. Are you over-ingesting? Don't judge yourself. Reassess why it may be happening. Now, let's move into the next and final portion of this episode. This one is really good. I hope you're getting a lot from this episode. It's something that is coming from me sitting and journaling for hours yesterday. Shout out to you. If you're getting anything from this episode, let me know. Reach out to me. Say, hey, I really like this part of this episode, and tell me why, so I can come out with more content like this that is actually helpful and is serving you as you go through your journey. So we talked about identifying symptoms of burnout. We talked about why it may be happening with overload and what overload actually looks like for proactive people as well. Now we're going to talk about mastery and why that's much more effective than overload. Overload is a phase of almost neuroticism. Overload is that area of our lives where we're saying, I'm going to read every book, go to every seminar, talk to every pro, every mentor, ingest all this stuff. You know how much of that you're going to be able to digest? Dive headfirst into this. I invite you to go hard. But I would say from experience that I have needed to categorize things in my life. And when you say, okay, how can I categorize these things? Maybe I will categorize real estate, learning about finance, learning about, social skills, learning about how to be a better brother, how to be a better family person, how to improve my romantic life, how to improve my spiritual life, how to enhance my relationships, all these things, all different categories. Maybe the last three were similar categories, but you get the point. If we can categorize these things and focus for a season on a certain category, I think that is a very proactive way of keeping things from just becoming this mushroom bomb of overload, And one of these things is maybe for a month, all you do is study finance, right? All you do is study real estate the next month. The next month, all you do is study social dynamics. The next month, all you do is study, family life and how to improve lifestyles and be more open, whatever it may be. For me, I'm in a season of learning about finance. And I've created a budget. I've been fairly strict with it, I want to say, but I need to improve. So I realize, okay, I've been literally spending the last 6 to 7 months learning almost not exclusively, but largely about taxes, about finance, about finance and business, about legislature, about things that I don't want to really spend the time to learn about because I used to think it was boring, but now I recognize that if I don't become a master of those boring things, I want to master money, okay? I'm not going to let money master me in my life. So that's the way I look at that for finance. And then another category I'm getting into the new season, which you'll hear an interview soon, if not already, with is a concept of house hacking. And when I say that, I'm not talking about burglary. I'm talking about essentially having your cost of living subsidized by renters and having your own property or properties, plural. So I'm going to begin that journey very shortly here. So that's a way to focus on mastery. Now, again, when I say these things, I know some of you are going to think, okay, well, you know what? John doesn't know. I can read multiple books a week. I'm in the midst of finishing 6 books right now, and I'm killing it in my life. Good for you, my friend. Good for you. This doesn't apply to you then, but for, I think, the large people who are like myself, I don't know if it's the majority or not, but if you can relate to this, then I've just given you a preview of your own mind right now, basically, with sharing about what I've been going through. I'm actually breaking a pretty decent sweat as well recording this episode because I'm very passionate about this concept. Again, that is a huge thing, the burnout being the evil twin, basically, of progress. And then direction determining your destiny and distraction determining your direction. So be very careful of who is distracting you and why. Ask yourself those questions. Mastery. I have found with bucket lists, with things in life, with businesses, with goals, there is no possible way for one person to do it all. And when I say that, I mean that you maybe whimsically wish would happen one day. I think the most important ones, yes, you can and will achieve. That's going to depend largely on your discipline and some other things and your faith, and all these things play a very large part. What I think, though, from observing elders who have become, have lived a successful, humble life, is they were consistent and they were decisive. And maybe not in that order. Maybe they were decisive and consistent simultaneously. It's important to maintain those things. These are principles. I'm recommending them because I've found that, hey, look, if this person's winning in their life, in their business, in their walk, I'm going to take some notes. And overload is unfortunately it's a lack of maturity. It's an over consumption versus output, because we learn a lot when when you output and you start contributing and you recreate things and you work to improve society, even for a little help to make life less painful, even for just some people. That matters a lot. It matters a lot. And one of the biggest things we will come against, one of the most sinister lies that will come against you and comes against me frequently in an attempt to derail the mission, the purpose, and the encouraging words and inspiring words that we want to give to others, is the lie that, well, life is so hard, you're doing good, things are going great, and then I got cancer and you're dead 6 months later. Yes, that happens. Yes, it's tragic, but life is bounded by mortality, to quote Jordan Peterson here, basically modern day philosopher. If you haven't heard, he's been a very controversial talking piece for genders, and he's the guy. Jordan Peterson said, in regards to this cancer reference, that's not the point. Life is bounded by mortality, but that doesn't mean that you don't get out there and contend and you minimize the net amount of suffering in the world. That is something. That is something. And that's why I'm shameless in what I'm doing. And that's why I hope you will be shameless and go hard. That is really something. So keep going, focus, and remember your why. Get out of this burnout. And now we'll talk a bit about how to alleviate burnout and how to move out of it and recalibrate, regenerate, heal. For my Christians out there, you may very well need to go through some healing. All of us do, truly. All of us do, regardless of what you believe. Spiritual healing is essential. It's something that needs to happen. I'm not an expert in this area, so I'm not going to talk too much on it. I believe that you should turn to God for this and nowhere else. That's what I found. You don't want to mix two things in the same pot. Okay, that's my beliefs. Now, that is something that matters. We need to assess what we're listening to on a frequent basis, whether that's music, what kind of movies we're into, what kind of TV shows we're into. I don't care what you believe. When we're constantly bombarding ourselves with immoral things that are just not healthy to watch, whether it's an immense amount of violence, an immense amount of profanity, an immense amount of just vile behavior, when we are constantly ingesting that, and that's become our appetite, it's going to manifest in our lives, and we're going to reap similar. Be aware of what you're ingesting. Along this vein of getting off of burnout, you need to sit down and just think. And if you're so proactive, you really can't sit down and just do nothing, grab a journal, a piece of paper, and just write. You will be amazed. Here's the thing. I haven't journaled for 2 months before yesterday. Time flies. It really flies. It's not going to wait for you. So if you're feeling some burnout, sit down, journal, and think about what you've journaled, and then come up with some action steps that you can then take after you journal, because that's so productive. For 2 hours of time, now you have a recalibrated compass to what to focus on. Whereas you may say, I don't have time for that. I'm not going to waste my time doing that. Here's the thing, my friend. If we don't take the time to calibrate and get focused on what we need to actually do, we're just going to keep spinning and then burn out more and more, and that productivity is not going to be as good as or what it should be. You may be productive in an area that you never should have been productive in. And what's funny about this as well is this is for those proactive people who really just need to produce something even in their rest. So yeah, if you're this person, this might have caused you to chuckle a little bit, because it's like we can't even sit down and journal without coming up with a list of action steps, without that promise of, on the other side of unplugging and unwinding, or even taking a short reprieve, very short, 2 hours at the most, there isn't going to be some action step list that we can go attack right after, so it's funny. I will invite you to do this until you're done journaling. Your wrists may get sore. Sit there, wait 10 minutes, journal some more. You may very well likely write pages, and you look at those pages afterwards and say, wow, really? This is wild. What's so interesting is our minds are so powerful. You already know what you're going to journal, but the journaling will allow you to conceptualize it in a, I don't know if this is correct, but a hard and fast way that you can understand in a more actionable sense, where I knew that I was not getting to bed on time multiple nights, and I knew all these symptoms of burnout. But until I actually wrote down all these things, it was not I was like holding myself back, because I knew that, okay, hey, this is causing this, which is causing that, which is yielding this result, which I don't like. I don't like this result, which then leads me to want to numb myself and distract myself. Because guess what? I've got so much stuff going on. I don't have time to sit down and figure out why I'm yielding this negative result that I don't want in whatever area. So that's really what I'm getting down to here, is focusing in on mastery versus overload or versus overconsumption can allow that cushion of space for these times to really just for us to expand into and unwind into, that will then yield a actually more productive life anyway, and a more impactful life. And these are my opinions, and I think it's accurate. I look forward to growing more and learning more, and and discovering where I may be flawed in these thinkings. But I genuinely believe that this episode is going to resonate with quite a few of you, and I'm very excited that I got to spend this time with you. I really do appreciate you guys listening. I can't explain to you it's so humbling to know that anyone would take the time to listen to a podcast that I produced. If you would have told 2 years ago this to me, I would have been like, what? People would actually do that? But now I recognize that we all have something to say, and it matters. And I hope that this episode was found tactical for you, helpful. And again, I invite you Take these action steps. Take that day off every week. Pick the day and just make it a day of regenerating, rest, recuperating, journaling, hydrating, taking a nap, whatever it is. Do these things and make sure that you're consistent with it. I'm telling you this it's more for myself really than anyone else, I can guarantee you. So I got a big week ahead as well. I'm excited, guys. I can't, it's funny. I'm going to invite you to get an audiobook now from audiobook.com, which I know some of you would probably remember that from the intro. I'm glad you could pick up on that. It's meant to be a little bit humorous based on today's topic of avoiding over ingestion, but maybe an easy step is to replace things. Replace things you're ingesting that you shouldn't be, quote unquote, shouldn't be, or literally shouldn't be, or don't want to be, but consistently find yourself ingesting with other things. So let's say you're listening to top 100 music on the way to work or commutes every day. Maybe you switch that out for an audiobook. Kind of take a little bit of step back. Maybe you're listening to podcasts every day. Maybe you replace that with an audiobook that's a little more structured and slow paced. Maybe you take too many books, so maybe you need to take a step back from listening or reading so many books and just take some time to think and just have no noise. I think the no noise is very scary for most of us, but definitely for those of you who are the top 100 dance in your car type of people who just want to forget and have fun and throw your hands in the air. Nothing wrong with that. I think it's so fun. I would invite you though, take these incremental steps so you don't altogether avoid taking any action steps towards recalibrating. As always, live wide open and Godspeed. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to today's episode. Again, this was a blast to record and I'm honored that you listened to it all the way through. I want to hear from you. How can I do better? Email me, jonathan@thehearthealthyhustle.com. Also, you can email info@triplehpodcast.com. That's a little easier to remember. It's hhhpodcast.com. Invite you to DM me on Instagram. Handle on Instagram is @hearthealthyhustle. That's 3 words and that's all. Heart Healthy Hustle. Send me some questions. Send me some guests you would love to hear on the show. Send me Facebook messages on our Facebook group. I'd love to hear from you. This is your friend Jonathan, and until next time, Godspeed. Fearless.